validated the product. So it's like going on into Amazon. You've got all these third-party reviews, and in that review, all these third parties have validated the product for you. So people.com, thanks for coming. People.com is that editorial validation, or third-party review validation, and it has a huge bearing on how people perceive the validity of a product.
So you could use that in a social media campaign then.
Exactly.
As seen on People magazine in 2016.
Yeah. Just because, and that's what's interesting, is that the media, so direct response is really good for acquisition. But what we found out is that these magazines or these traditional media that are used to be based on impressions, they're not so good on transactions, including TV, unless you're shopping at or QVC. But if you get some kind of good editorial feedback or publication, you use that as a reference, and it's really good for your direct response. So, you talk about how do you start marketing? Well, this is the puzzle that you want to solve. How do I solve this puzzle? And how do I do it in a way that I'm not throwing money into the wastebasket? Yes, sir.
You've been talking about runners the whole evening. Aren't there other markets for this product, like hikers?
That's a really good question.
Runners could fill those things with bullets to reload their gun.
That's right.
Moms with babies have all kinds of crap they're trying to carry around. Seems like there's a whole bunch of other avenues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a really good question. So that's the other vector that's missing in this thing. The reason I say that is because people use the flip up not only for running, they use it for travel. When they go to Disneyland, they want to carry their phone or what have you. The gun industry, women are buying a lot more handguns, and they want to carry it out, take it with them. I've had lots of discussions with the gun industry. Travel industry, we talked about. What else? Oh, equestrian, horse riding. What other markets? Pet industry, because women who, walk their dogs, they got their spandex and nylon, leggings, they want something that they carry on. We can go down some other permutations, but what we found out is that cost of marketing. We started testing, we've done a lot of different tests in those different segments. And what's interesting is that lifestyle images, even for running, we tested those too. Running, I don't know if you've seen these images. But anyway, these images are not there only for a reason. Just arbitrarily. They're there because they've been tested and proven. And so what we found out is that the most effective way of spending money to promote this product is through focusing on the running segment. Now, we had that very discussion. Why don't we target the travel industry or the medical industry? And when our sales went exponential, and then it plateaued. When it started plateauing, we had that very discussion. Okay, because we always talked about it. Let's ride the gravy train on the running segment. But what's interesting is that once it saturated, we're thinking about let's get into the medical. Let's think about the travel. Let's try to reposition this market. It's segmented and all that. Nothing.
Cost per impression is high.
Cost per impression was high. Cost per acquisition was high. Actually, cost per impression wasn't high. It was so high. It was cost per acquisition was that was so high. might say, what about what about stop selling on online? We've only been talking about digital online. It's only a fragment, 35% of our sales. So what's that 65%? It's retail. So what we found out is that through retail, we also found that some retailers are not really good at selling this product. The only reason why they're selling it is because of our marketing. And which is really bad because you're already giving the resellers margin. And then you're, on top of giving them margin, you're also spending marketing dollars. So it's a double whammy on the cost. Because the only reason why you would give resellers a margin is because they're selling it for you. But if your marketing is driving the sales, why do you need them for? So we learned that lesson too. And like Kohl's was one example where, we thought, I think they had like 500, 600, 700 stores, like we're playing the numbers game, we're gonna get, we're gonna make X number of dollars on these guys. Nada. Target, same thing. So we're not selling at Target anymore. Bed Bath & Beyond, we're still selling because they continue to it's just like it's a stable month product. But that's a really good question. And I think, I say lucky, I say this in a very careful way. We were good. Warren was very astute in this regard. He was I think he won the, argument internally that, hey, let's cut our losses, okay? We've tested this and this and that. Fundamentally, if you've tried this and this and this and that, don't try to beat a dead horse. And I think that's the thing that you gotta be also careful about, because some businesses don't know when to stop marketing and selling. And the good news is that out of a $30 product, well, we have cash. We have cash in the bank. Rather than, I can tell you right now, I could still be selling millions of these units without a problem. But the cost of acquisition is going to go up, and the dollar contribution is not going to be positive, it's going to be negative. So why do you want to be at a negative dollar contribution? Because that's just a bad business.
Would you be open to tell us what your cost is on something like this?
I'm sorry?
What the cost of the product is?
Yeah, I can get a copycat product for $3, $2.50 from China. It's not glucine approved fabric, but our cost is at $6.50.
$6.50?
So when they were on Amazon, what were they selling for? The copycats?
Like $15, $20.
About half of what you
Yeah,
guys
and in fact, Nathan is selling a product called the Hipster. It's a copycat, but they went around our patent on purpose. But they have that's a very interesting strategy because they're not very good digitally, marketing-wise. So they basically stiff-armed all the resellers to stop selling the flip-flop in some of their stores. And only their product, because Nathan has a lot of different accessories. And when you're a reseller, you'd rather work with not multiple brands per se. If there's one brand that's constantly selling, absolutely, that's why they did that with the flip-flop. But if it's like in a mature state where you don't really, it's not in high demand anymore, you'd rather deal with just simplify your operations, right? Why have multiple accounts for payables and all that stuff? You just have one vendor, what have you.
So you still sell that?
We are, but we're not investing in marketing significantly anymore.
So it's plateau, that's when you know when to stop.
Yes, it's
And it stays there, it's just staying there, or is it actually declining?
it's starting to. Well, we don't know yet. I think this year it's going to start declining.
And then you need to make another decision?
Well, we've introduced this product called flip-out crops, where it's women's crops that's integrated with the flip-out. And that's actually had a better sell-through than our classic and the zipper version. So we're a little gung-ho about that because that actually can open up a lot of new product development for us. But thing has been that that also we're taking a very methodical approach. Again, people will tell us if you ask women, women will tell you that it's a religious debate as to whether they like crops or leggings. If you're a women's crop wearer, apparel wearer, they'll wear crops. They won't wear leggings. It doesn't matter how cold it is outside.
Crops is a brand name, isn't it?
Crops is just a style of women's leggings that are come up above your ankle, and then leggings usually go all the way down to your ankle. And that's just a stylistic difference. It's like having a religious debate with a woman or anyone on that
So
product.
the only way to really restore the product is to give it to the next generation of products, I guess.
Yeah, we were trying to introduce new products, leveraging the brand. I think, and I'll be honest with you, I think we were about a year or two late introducing the football crop in terms of leveraging the brand awareness or the brand marketing that we had. What I mean by that is that we're not spending so much money on marketing on the football anymore. So whenever we start promoting the football crop, it's all incremental marketing dollars directly associated with the football crop. Whereas had we introduced it about a year ago or a year and a half ago, when we were making positive net contribution with our marketing and selling of the football, that marketing dollars could have been amortized through the investment of football crop as well. So that would be this optimal timing-wise. That would be the best way to do it. But for other reasons, why we didn't introduce it.
Sort of a hypothetical, stupid question. As you see your curve starting to level off and your sales starting to slow down,
Yeah.
is there any strategy in creating your own knockoff and selling it perhaps?
That's a really good question. Yes, the answer is yes. Yeah, yeah,
Just put a different name on it?
yeah,
Make it cheaper? And
yeah. In fact, we talked about that. We thought about that for Latin America too, for a variety of reasons. Latin America, people don't have a lot of income, and so yeah. But that's a really good question. Yeah, and that's a good strategy. And in fact, that's on our roadmap. Yeah, that's something that I'd like to do right now. In fact.
So when you went to China for football manufacturing
Yes, sir.
with the super high volumes. So how did you hook up with the right one, or did it take some work? Did you go through an agent, or did it go real smooth? Or?
You got to be careful with sourcing. We were able to find the sourcing that does the stuff for Patagonia and Lululemon.
So it's the same factory that
That's right.
similar type materials.
That's right. Yeah. You got to be careful with the sourcing because your source is your copycat.
Like, 'cause who knows more?
Yeah. Because if you think about it, especially if you go to China, right? Because if you think about it, I mean, they're in a whole different paradigm, right? Different game, where they're trying to feed people. You know, they're not talking about patents or whatever. They're talking about trying to feed people. So if they've got they made an investment. Let's just say whatever the facilities or mold or whatever products that you guys have in mind that they've already invested, they want to be able to amortize that as long as they possibly can, right? And so usually it's your source. I mean, that's the easiest culprit of your copycat. So that's what you got to be really, really careful about. That's why a lot of manufacturers will go to China and have a person there and source out the right manufacturer and have a person there that reports, that's on your payroll. And I mean, if you look at Foxconn, for example, Apple's version, I mean, let's just use that as an analogy, that's a simple one. All those guys, they're not allowed to leak anything. And the Koreans are the best at copying stuff. I mean, there's a whole corporate espionage that goes on all the time.
As an Apple, I mean, that factory is dedicated to their products.
That's right.
They're not sharing it with
That's right. Yeah.
companies.
Yeah.
Did they actually build their own?
Yeah. Yeah. When I went to, when I used to do business with Samsung in my software days, I went through like, I would never bring a thumb drive or anything like that. Even my iPhone, they would just, they would put a cover on it that I couldn't take out until I go out. And if I did take it out, they would know that I took it out. I would have to go through like 3-4 different security channels to get into, the R&D center at Samsung. And it's funny because it's like, that's what they were exactly doing with the Japanese when they're copying the Japanese. Yeah, it's just so, and I think you have to, I think what's interesting is that the reason I share this with you about the Japanese or the Koreans or the Chinese and all that, and the reality is that that's the world now. We're not just marketing in California, selling, competing with somebody in Texas or whatever. The world is your oyster, as they say. It's eminently easier now for us to do business in Japan, Australia, Europe, what have you, just because, for example, I'll give you another example. I don't have to get on a flight on a plane all the time to Europe because I just do Skype. That's just a simple example. It's a little harder because the trust thing, you never know. So some point in time, you have to go over there and audit, and you do your own audit and see, how legit these guys are. But I think that's, the reason I'm a glasses half full person. That's why I'm a sales guy. And I don't want to discourage you. So it is by not trusting people. But the reality is that you shouldn't trust anyone. You shouldn't trust your lawyer, patent lawyer. I'm sorry, Roger. You shouldn't trust me, right? You should, the days when everything was because world is, I think internet has been such a great thing because it's supposed to have put things on an even playing field for people. But I personally think that Americans are not accustomed to dealing with other cultures. It's been a great thing for other cultures. We've, helped with the event of the internet, it's no longer, things are symmetric. But different cultures have different motives. And the reason why we're talking about the copycats is that it's not an American thing. There are very few Americans that copy stuff. And there are people who copy that stuff in the US, but the way they do it is not like the way the Chinese do it, right? The ethics that the Chinese have, which you don't think that they have ethics, it's not the same. They don't, what they believe is right or wrong is very different from what we believe is right or wrong. They don't think that copying is really necessarily a bad thing. They don't, fundamentally don't. So for us to talk about intellectual property with the Chinese copycats, it's just barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah, I've heard that that's a sense of accomplishment, how well you can copy things. It shows your skills.
It shows your skills. Yeah. But the reality is that that's why we're talking about that, and to believe, and I think that we shouldn't be surprised that people do that. We're surprised because we're so ethnocentric, we're Americans, and we have a certain standards, ethical standards here. even the copycat people in the U.S. have a certain level of ethical standards, right? So I hope that if there's anything that I can impart with you is that, you know, if you got a great idea, yes, I'm interested in learning about your feedback, but please note that, you know, we're interested. It may not be the right fit, but maybe we direct you to the right people. But if we don't do business together, if we're not, you know, if we don't get introduced further, I hope that, you know, innovation is a great thing. And I think that aside from my selfish motives, standing up here with you, I mean, it just gives me the goosebumps to talk about it. I think it's just a fantastic thing, and I, you know, respect you for what you're doing. It's wonderful. But I hope that you will not be careful in trusting people.
If the Koreans are so great at copying, why don't they just copy money instead of products?
I know. You know what the Samsung guy said to me? Because I told him, like, okay, you're number one in TVs, because that's the guys that I was working with. And they were telling me that, you know what, Keenan, we don't know what to do anymore, because we've never been number one. And the topic of conversation for us at the time was that it was no longer about hardware, because if you look at, you know, all these devices, it's the software, right? That's what the killer app is now. They didn't have any software team, and that's why I had a startup in Boulder. This little podunk software development team out of Boulder could meet at the corporate headquarters, R&D center, is because they didn't have it at the time. I mean, obviously they do now, but at that time they did, and that's what they said, is that we are afraid because we don't know, and it's true. If you've been to Korea, everything was centered on, just like you said, not copying necessarily, but, you know, making that thing better, like doing exactly what they did, but doing it better. That's the entire culture was cultivated on that, because they don't have any natural resources, so they made an investment on people. Thank you.
Thank you.